Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor Templar here, and as usual, the disinformation goes. People know nothing. Gene Roddenberry did not write Star Trek. I mean, this is one of the many things out there that people just don't seem to understand. First of all, Roddenberry was kind of an odd guy, and I think a lot of things can be summed up that he was involved in very strange things and even black governmental projects. He came from a criminal law enforcement background. Daddy was a cop, he was a cop. That should tell you quite a bit. Certainly, absolutely no morality there, and they work for the corporations. One of the things that's very interesting with Star Trek is that, first of all, Roddenberry's conception of Star Trek was a space opera. It was supposed to be an opera. He really wanted to have it on boats in the ocean. It was because it was the time close to the lunar landing, the moon landing. He changed it over from boats to space, and it was then sold to Desilu Studios, the concepts, etc. But, you know, as with most things in life, particularly when it comes to media, movies, TV, there's a multitude of people behind the basic idea. And they all contribute huge amounts to a production that you will consider, well, this came from the creator. Well, it didn't. Somebody makes the actual sets, so what a set looks like, the colors used. It's nothing to do with the writer. The uniforms. Well, that's the costume person. They designed that. There's no uniform. Roddenberry didn't specify a uniform. He didn't specify what the actual captain's deck would look like. All these things were very, very general, and people came in who made the sets and made it look like that, and these are based on the technology available at the time. So if you could think that he actually wrote any of that, it's kind of amusing. The other thing, which is so paramount to Star Trek, which is Spock, was not his invention, other than there being a first officer called that. Well, first of all, it was the actor Leonard Nimoy who came up with the pointed ears, etc. He also came up with the entire Spock persona, this is it logical captain, this type of thing that everybody thought was so wonderful and we should all act like robots. I remember that in school, people thought, well, it's because everybody, that was the gossip. Certainly was not a good character as far as I'm concerned, but an interesting one. Now, if you see the actual pilot of Star Trek, you will see that Spock acted like an emotional person. Captain, we need help down here. It was absolutely the opposite. That's because the original pilot star, the actor who played Captain Kirk, was very understated, very low-key. And Leonard Nimoy stated this. So he said, well, what he needed was somebody who was very aggressive and excited because he was so low-key to make it work. You know, it just shows you what a talented actor Leonard Nimoy was to do that. When William Shatner took over, who was a very gregarious person, Leonard Nimoy decided to take this character into this very logical person, which is what the series was all about. Pilots are usually quite different than the series themselves with actors, etc. It's quite amazing the people who were in the original pilots that don't make it to the actual series. So that's very fast. So the actual persona of Captain Kirk as well was totally developed by Shatner. There was general guidelines. So it really amazes me that the key factors of all these things, and the capper to it all, is that Gene Roddenberry never in the thought of his little pea brain thought about one of the major things that Star Trek is known about. Klingons. Klingons were invented by the producer. They needed to have adversaries. Conflict is what makes entertainment. People can't sit around saying, oh, you're good looking. Oh, you're better looking. Oh, this is good. No, you have to have conflict. So the conflict is that the producer at that time brought in the Klingons, which is a major part of Star Trek. I mean, who do you think about when you think of Star Trek? Well, probably Dr. Spock to start off with, and the Klingon second, and of course, Captain Kirk. So the whole idea is that this was all part of this non-inventing of Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry had a very primitive understanding of Star Trek that was developed by a large team of people, and this is very true with all media, TV, movies, etc. The input is dramatic. If a scene looks good because there's cool costumes, it probably had nothing to do with the writers. Somebody had to design those costumes for each and individual person. So, it's very important to understand that and understand what kind of a mediocre talent so many people are. As I said, Roddenberry was a very strange individual, and he actually even tried to extort money from William Shatner. Now, Shatner states this in his book, written by his autobiography up until now. He clearly states there, both in writing and in his audio book, which I have, that he needed to go out to a particular show where he would make $2,000. You got to remember, this was time when Star Trek was not paying a lot and it was just new, and this was a lot of money. Especially back in the 70s, $2,000 probably equivalent to $10,000 now, maybe more. He wanted time off early on a Friday so he could go to this convention or meeting or speaking, etc., because this was a great deal. And of course, Roddenberry refused. He said, "You gotta, I can maybe make a deal with you if you pay me part of your speaking fee." And follow that up with the fact that you should learn who's the king here, who's in control, and who you need to be subservient to. I'm in charge. Well, I don't think anybody would respond too well to that atmosphere, but certainly William Shatner said, "Hey, forget it. I'm not going to put up with this," and left that particular meeting, and apparently something was come to some agreement, and he did finally go. But what a kind of nasty thing to do with someone you're working. And of course, Roddenberry at that time wasn't making much money either. He never made that much in the bigger picture, apparently, from a lot of the Star Trek stuff until the movie was made sometime later. But he wrote a lot of different scripts for a whole bunch of known programs in the 60s, and this is what he did mainly. The Star Trek was only popular on TV for 3 years, and the movie was made quite some time in the future when the Star Trek movie came out, and he wasn't even part of that to a large degree. He had a different story. So he's a very strange individual. All the things you think about Star Trek is something that was created by the production team or the actual actors themselves. And this is very true with one of these other very popular shows from the 70s called $6 Million Man, who came out as a sexy spy kind of guy. And even the theme song was Catch 'em If You Can, Love 'em If You Can. And this was a whole different than the classic $6 Million Man actual longer series. The first year was this quasi-spy thing, which I guess didn't do so well. So they finally revamped it, thanks to a lot of internal people, and came up with that really cool $6 Million Man that we're all familiar with. So, this is very important for everybody to note, that you're living in an illusion. Things and people are not what it appears, and everybody should really look into the facts. And it just depends whether you're out there. As a professional researcher like myself, I run into these things all the time. I'm listening to countless interviews, commentaries on films and other things, where you really get the insights of what's going on and who really does things. And here's a plain case of Roddenberry, and his conception of Star Trek was really nothing of what's on the screen.